Hey guys, Chase with Sherpa Equipment Company. Today we're going to be putting this bear paw on this 2020 Tundra. This specific bear paw is a 48-inch side plate, and that is meant to be paired with a Go Fast camper on a CrewMax short bed. This rack is designed to work with our second and third gen Tundras, which is the years 2007 to 2021. And we'll go ahead and go right into what you will receive in a package from us. You're going to have your fairing, your two side plates, your hardware, your mounting feet, and your crossbars. Before we do anything up on top of the truck, we're actually going to be building this rack on the table next to me. To do that, we're going to grab two of our crossbars, set them down on the table, spaced apart, and then we will be installing our side plates onto our crossbars. We're only going to need two crossbars for this step to get the side plates on. So on this rack, we are going to be using the middle mounting slot and the forwardmost mounting slot to attach to our crossbars. So we'll grab 4 black socket button bolts, and then 4 of our black washers, and we'll head over to the other table. So now we're going to put the side plate on the crossbar. It's not super critical where it is in the slot right off the bat. We'll center all that up later on during the install. But to do this, we'll just get both of our socket buttons started in that front slot, and then do the same in the shorter middle slot. So it's okay to leave those loose for right now. We're going to be adjusting all of that later, and we'll repeat that process on the other side. Getting the socket buttons started, but leaving them loose. All right, so now that our side plates are loosely attached to the crossbars, we're going to go ahead and focus our attention to the mounts. You'll notice all of the mounts are labeled with an M or an F. The other two that are not labeled are going to be your adjustable mounts, which will go in the rear of the rack. We'll get to those later. But for now, we're going to grab our front mounts and our middle mounts and install them on the crossbars. So before we put these on the crossbar, we're going to take our mount, take 2 M8 bolts with our M8 washers, and attach our front mount to the curved rivet mount. I'm just going to get these finger tight for right now, and we'll tighten them down later. Again, I'm only doing these finger tight. These will come off before the final install of the rack. Now that the rivet mounts are attached to the mounting feet, we'll be installing them on the crossbars. However, one more important thing to note on our mounting feet, there's a small notch in the bottom corner. That notch is always going to face the front end of the vehicle. That will ensure that you get your mounts on the right side and the fitment is correct. So to get these attached to the crossbars, I'm going to take 8 1/4 20 bolts and 8 1/4 inch washers, as well as 8 T-nuts and our mounting feet. Just lay them out here roughly with our hardware in the middle. I'm going to ensure that our front notch is facing forward, so line that up, and then to install the mounts onto the crossbar, I'm just going to drop my T-nuts in and place the mount over it and get those just started. I'll go finger tight, and then I'll back them off about a 1/4 turn just so I can still move the mount back and forth on the crossbar. And I'll do the same for the rest of the mounts. It does not matter the orientation of the thick side of the T-nut. It can go in or out as long as the flat face is facing up. So now our mounts are loosely attached to our crossbars. We're going to go ahead and now focus on our adjustable mounts. These will act as your rear mounting foot for your rack. And to put these together, we're going to take our carriage bolts. The rounded end will be on the side with letters. Take a 1/4 inch washer and then your 1/4 inch nut and just run that down so it's still able to be moved up and down, but you can get it snug. And so you can see I can still move this back and forth. We'll be adjusting that later on in the process, and we'll do the same with the other set. So now we're going to attach our adjustable mounts to the crossbar. I'm going to bring it over here just for room, set it up in place. This crossbar is going to go in the furthest back slot, And we're going to attach these mounts to that crossbar using the same methods we did for the other mounts. It'll be 4 T-nuts, 4 1/4 and 4 1/4" washers. And our mounts, these ones are not side specific, so they do not matter which side they go on. And we'll drop our T-nuts in and get them on. You are going to want the rubber pad, however, facing the outside of the rack, so the rubber pad should be closest to the side plate. Now that our adjustables are on, we'll attach that crossbar to these side plates, and then we'll get the rack up on the roof. All right, so the final step before actually taking the rack up to find our holes to drill, we are going to center up the front 2 crossbars in the slot, and then the rear crossbar, it's not hugely important where it goes, but just to make it easy to square up, I'm going to slide it all the way to the back of the back slot. Okay, so now that we'll start with the rear is at the back of the slot. I'll go ahead and tighten these socket buttons up. That way we can start squaring up our rack and make it easier to move. In the middle mount, or on the middle crossbar, I'm going to get it as close to center as I can and tighten up. And I will do the same thing on the front crossbar. Get it into the center of the slot and tighten it down. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. This side's pretty important because getting these matched up to the other side is going to be what makes your rack sit square on your roof. So again, we're going to do middle, middle, and rear. So now we're going to be removing the black gutter trim. I'm going to take a plastic trim remover tool up there with me. And we are not going to be removing it fully. We're just going to be pulling it back somewhere under the camper and setting it aside. And to do this, you'll just kind of work up under the front lip. And you'll notice there's some foam tape up under that is attached to the trim. You just kind of have to pull through that and then simply set it up out of the way. I'm going to set his. Okay, so the whole trim has come off. This is not a big deal, but we'll just set it up out of the way. This one looks like it might have been taken off before, but not the end of the world. So now we're going to do the same on this side. Again, just working up under it, getting through that white foam tape and setting it off to the side. This one looks like it's going to come all the way off again as well. So we'll just set it up and out of the way. So if you don't get all of that residue off, it's not the end of the world. Your rivet mount should just go right over it, but it's a good idea to just get as much as you can off. Now that we've done that, I'm going to call in a buddy to help me, and we're going to get this rack up on the truck. You're going to want to be careful with this. So we're going to be lifting and setting it over the truck, and then we'll go ahead and adjust back and forth to find out where it should sit. So now we got Alex up on top of the truck. There's not really any great way of doing this, but you'll grab the rack, and we'll take this up. Just want to be careful of the paint and slowly lower it down. It's a little bit heavy. And then we'll set it somewhere around in the gutter. Your gutter mounts are going to obviously sit in the bottom of the gutter, and you can adjust, since we left our mounts loose, you can adjust out so they sit correctly where they should. Okay, so after setting the rack up on the truck, everything is still loose. After that, the next step is just moving it around, finding out where the spline of the rack matches the curvature of the roof, checking from the front, making sure everything's centered. You just want to get a good setup, good idea of where it's sitting on the truck, get it pretty to a happy medium of where you think you might want to start drilling. We are going to be putting the fairing on before marking any spots to double check the fitment. But right now, we're pretty satisfied with how it's sitting, how it's matching the curve. Front to back looks good. Distance to the camper looks good. But like I said, we'll put that fairing up, double check the spacing off the roof, and then we'll move forward to marking our spots. You'll notice that we moved the front crossbar up to the front of the slot. not necessary. We found it fit the best on the truck with that crossbar in that position. However, on your truck, you want to make sure, move it around, try it a couple different ways until you're satisfied with the curve. That's the most important thing. But now we're going to put our fairing on, double check the fitment, and then we'll be marking holes to drill. Okay, so to install the fairing, we're going to take a crossbar, set it to the side. I'm going to grab my remaining 6 T-nuts, and we're also going to take our short black socket button bolts. There should be 6 of them, and 6 more black 1/4-inch washers. Oh, and the fairing. To do fairing, I like to lay out the fairing, lay out the crossbar next to it, and flush up the end of the fairing to the end of the crossbar. And then I'll kind of make an imaginary line between the mounting holes to the crossbar, and that's where I will place the T-nuts. So now that I got my T-nuts in, I'll take my socket buttons, and I like to start in the middle. Set your fairing over your crossbar, finding your T-nuts below, and just start tightening that down. You're going to want to keep it loose because this will allow you to slide your crossbar back and forth on your fairing on your crossbar to find the remaining T-nuts. So once all of your bolts are started, you're just going to square up the fairing to the edge of the crossbar, making it flush on both sides. That will ensure good fitment, and we'll tighten down these socket buttons. You'll be attaching the fairing to the rack the same way you'd attach a regular crossbar. You're going to take your inch black socket buttons and some washers. Again, you're going to want to remember that everything on the rack is still loose, so be careful where you put your weight, especially if you have it in a good spot. You don't want to shift the rack around. So you're going to want your fairing to sit pretty much flush with the tip of your side plate. This should leave about a 1/4-inch gap off your roof. If that's the case, you know it's in the right spot. You will have wind noise if you let this sit on your roof directly, so make sure you're flush and make sure there's a nice gap between the rack and the roof. All right, so now that we are satisfied with the location of the rack on the roof, we are going to prepare to drill it. The first step is going to be disconnecting the negative terminal on the battery. We will do that. We'll disconnect this, secure it so there's no risk of airbags going off. And the next step is we're going to go back to the B-pillar, and we're going to pull out the 2 10mm bolts that are holding the B-pillar on. And the reason we're doing that is going to be these 2 bolts here. You're going to want to be very careful with these clips. They're pretty sensitive. We're going to back those out, pop the B-pillar down, and then we're just going to get our hand up under there, feel around for the clips, and make sure that they are not going to interfere with where we're going to be drilling into our rivet mounts up here. Now that the bolts are out, we'll just kind of pop that back away, and that should give us enough room to get our hand back in there to make sure we're clear of all of the brackets that we need to clear. So now our B-pillar's slightly off. We can go ahead and pull the rubber door seal off. This will kind of free up our headliner, which gives us a little bit more room, and we can see that bracket up in there that we are trying to avoid. We'll go up to the front door as well, do the same so we can check out how it looks from the front. We've already started to pull this one off, which again, just to ensure that the mounting position will be okay. So after we have everything separated, our door seals, B-pillar, you can kind of get your hand up in there and feel up behind the airbag, and you will be able to feel the bottom of the track. It's a little bit weird feeling at first, but you can feel around and find the side of the track and then the bottom of the track, and kind of just look at your mount, look where the rivet's going to be going through, feel around, make sure there's no brackets. There is a bracket up here in the B-pillar, so you want to make sure you're not on that. And once you've made sure there's nothing behind it, you can reattach all that or wait till the end, and then we'll mark our holes and we'll get to drilling. Before I punch holes, I'm going to take the fairing off. It'll give me a little bit more room to work with, makes it a little easier to see where my holes are going. So we'll get this off and then punch our holes. Okay, so now we have confirmed that the brackets are clear from where we're going to be drilling. I got my center punch. We're going to go up to the top of the truck, and all we're going to do is go into each rivet spot, center punch those holes. I'm just gonna do it once for now. I can punch them a few more times after we get the rack back off the truck to ensure we get a clean drill, and then we'll start drilling holes. To try to get your hole as centered as you can on the hole that is meant for the rivet. Once you're happy with the placement of that, go ahead and push down, make a mark, double check, confirm looking down through the hole that it's somewhere near the center. Do the same on the back hole. That's our marks for that one. We'll go ahead and do the same on all 4 mounts. Now that our holes are marked, we're gonna take the rack off again, just like we put it on. Once the rack's off, we'll go ahead, punch our holes a couple more times, and then drill them out. All right, so now we get to the fun part. We're gonna drill the holes out. I'm gonna step it up 1 time. I'm using a 3/32 bit, I believe. Anything under 1/8, I think, is a good starting place. But yeah, we'll go up, drill in. You wanna make sure your drill bit does not go punching through the roof too far. You really don't wanna risk messing with those airbags. You know, we recommend putting a drill stop on it. If you have one of those laying around, we're gonna just go ahead and do it, because we've done a few of these. So yeah, you're just gonna go find your marked spots and start drilling. It's important to not press too hard, because once it does finally get through the roof, you don't really wanna be plunging very deep. Oof. Perfect. So one important thing on these middle mounts, when you're drilling them out, there's some sandwiched sheet metal under there, so these ones will take a little bit more time. Again, just be patient with it, check it every so often. I've been drilling this one for a minute now, and I can just see there's a hole at the very bottom of my drill bit hole that's starting to work through. So kind of want to continue to be patient with it. It will go through, but just let the drill bit do its work. Okay, now we'll drill these holes out on this side. So now all the pilot holes are drilled. We're gonna step up to a 3/16. This will be our final drill bit. So we'll drill these out. So now our 3/16 holes are all drilled up on top of the truck. So the rack is back off. All we're gonna do is remove the rivet mounts, and we're gonna be installing these before we put the rest of the rack up. So we're gonna wanna take all the bolts out of all of our rivet mounts. Again, keeping the flat and the contoured separate, and remembering which goes where. For this step, now we're gonna I got all the rivet mounts, again, keeping the contoured separate from the flat. Contoured is going to go on the front, flat in the back. I'm gonna take my rivets and my silicone and my rivet gun and head up to the top of the truck. Some of our powder coat is a little bit thick sometimes, so you will occasionally have to take your 3/16 bit and just run it through the rivet holes. The hole is the correct size, but with that powder coat, it builds up enough to sometimes make it kind of tricky to get your rivet through. Good. Okay, so when installing the gutter mounts, you're gonna dab some silicone over the hole and slightly around it, just enough to cover everything up and make sure it's watertight, just in case water did somehow get in there. Take your gutter mount. I like to put my rivets through first, helps me line up everything a little bit easier. And then through the silicone into the holes. And then I like to use a rubber mallet if it doesn't like to go all the way down right off the bat, just to make sure you get a nice tight seal. Take your rivet gun, push down, sucking it to the roof, and then repeat on the back rivet. Cool. So now our next step is getting our gutter mount or gutter trim back in. To do this, let's slide it back into place there. And all I'm gonna do is take a little paint pen or Sharpie just to mark a spot to trim it. And I'll make a couple marks. I'll just kind of work my way down just to fit the gutter trim back into the gutter, make it look nice. Putting this trim back in isn't 100% necessary. We like to put it in, just adds a nice finished look to it. However, we do recommend maybe throwing some double-sided tape, double-sided 3M tape or something down, just to keep it from falling out. But if it does fall out driving down the road, not the end of the world. On the front piece, you should have a little clip. That'll just clip in back into that existing mount and should press right back down in there, giving you a nice finished look on top. All right, so once again, we're gonna be taking the whole rack, putting it back up on our mounts that are now installed on the roof. We'll be taking our M8 bolts with us because that will be the final time we will suck it down to those rivet mounts. And so grab your friend one more time, get the rack up there, and then we'll tighten it down.
We're done. We should do a tutorial just on that.
Oh boy. You ready? It's coming. Oh. When setting the rack down, you're gonna wanna try to guide the mounting feet onto the rivet mounts that are on your roof. That way you're not doing that and scratching your paint. To make it a little easier, so you're not fighting each other back and forth, is have one side loosely start their M8 bolts from their mounting foot into their rivet mount. That way, once he has his in, I can just slide my side back and forth to get the correct fitment. Once we both have our bolts loosely installed, we'll start centering up the rack to get it centered before the final tighten down. Okay, so now all of our M8 bolts are loosely installed onto the rivet mounts. This is where Alex and I are gonna work back and forth, centering up the rack, looking at it from the front, looking at it from the side, just moving it back and forth until we get it to a nice centered spot on the truck. Once we are happy with the spot on the truck, how it's sitting from the front, we'll go ahead and tighten those bolts down and install the rest of the crossbars. Yeah, so on the rear adjustable mount, you're just gonna put your pressure down on the bottom of the mount and then put your 7/16 on the back and tighten that up. This will keep the back of the rack secure with a pressure mount. All right, so now all the mounts are tight, all of our M8 bolts are tight into the rivet mounts, so we finally can put our crossbars up, and then we'll put the fairing up and we will be done. Okay, final step, grab your buddy one last time. We're gonna get the fairing up, and we'll just be repeating the same steps we did earlier in the video. Okay, so the final step is gonna be hooking up the battery, and then the rack is complete. It's a good idea after driving it for a couple weeks, couple hundred miles, go back through, check all your hardware. We do realize that this is an in-depth install. If you don't feel comfortable, we recommend checking out our site for a list of dealers that we trust to do our installs for us. If you do take this on and you run into any issues during the install, please do not hesitate to reach out. Other than that, the rack looks great, and thank you for watching.